Stranger Things' final episode had tons of little details, and there are bound to be some you missed. From iconic horror references to legendary songs, let's break them all down. So early on, there's a line that sounds like a throwaway joke, but it is a very specific nod to a horror icon. During a flicker of power at WSQK, Vicky asks Robin if the problem was caused by their group or some of those mutant Cujos. That name is far from random. Cujo is Stephen King's famous story about a dog that becomes dangerous after getting rabies, then turns into a real threat that traps people in a nightmare situation. The film version came out in 1983, which is right inside the era Stranger Things lives in. The reason this reference fits so well is that Stranger Things has always borrowed from the same pop culture shelf that King sits on. It's not trying to be subtle about that influence, it's celebrating it. And the word mutant makes it feel even more at home in Hawkins, because the town has spent years dealing with things that sound like monster movie headlines, even when the truth is much worse. That same idea continues with the way the finale uses music as an Easter egg, not just as regular background noise. In the hallways of one of Henry's memories, Sh-Boom by The Chords plays. That song is a classic doo-wop track that instantly places a scene in a specific emotional space, like a memory that wants to feel safe and normal. But it also had a major pop culture resurgence later on, including being used in big movies like Clue. So it isn't just a random oldie, it's a track that audiences already connect with a certain kind of retro mood, which makes it a smart choice for a memory scene that's trying to feel clean on the surface, even if the reality underneath is anything but. As the finale pushes toward the end, the music choices start acting like timeline stamps. When the gang exits the Upside Down, Prince's When Doves Cry plays. That song is one of the signature hits of 1984, so it anchors the moment in the mid-80s without needing any on-screen date. And it's not a simple celebration track either. It's got tension inside it, which fits the mood perfectly. They've survived, but nothing about them is untouched. Then later, the finale uses another Prince track, Purple Rain, during Mike and Eleven's goodbye. That choice carries a different kind of weight. Purple Rain is one of those songs people instantly connect with big emotion and endings. Using it there makes the goodbye feel final in a way that lands immediately, even if someone isn't thinking about it too hard. There's also a small meta reference hidden inside a conversation that sounds completely ordinary. Hopper talks about leaving Hawkins behind and mentions Montauk like it's just a nice place to go and start fresh. But Montauk is also connected to the earliest version of the show, before it became Stranger Things as the world knows it. So that one word is a double nod. In universe, it's a man dreaming about a quiet life after years of disaster. Out of universe, it's the show tipping its hat to its own origin, almost like a private goodbye to the first draft of the story. Then comes one of the biggest timeline anchors in the entire finale, the time jump to 1989. Stranger Things has always been very precise about making the 80s feel real, not just like a costume. The finale proves it by having the characters watching Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, which is a perfect marker for where they are now in the decade. Even if someone doesn't know the exact release date, the movie choice still signals something important. The characters have moved forward. Life didn't freeze in the year the trauma started. They grew up, time passed, and pop culture moved on with them. And the episode doesn't stop at just showing the movie. It drops a quick line that's basically a reward for anyone paying attention. No Ticket is a direct nod to one of the most memorable quotes tied to that Indiana Jones era. It's said fast, and it's easy to miss because it plays like casual dialogue. But that's why it works as an Easter egg. It doesn't interrupt the story to prove it's clever. It just sits there like something these characters would actually say, because their brains are wired to reference movies and TV the same way a lot of people do in real life. Right around that same stretch, the finale also sneaks in a few smaller "where are they now" details that double as little world callbacks. Robin isn't the DJ at WSQK anymore because Fast Hands Jimmy came back, which is funny on its own, but it also says something about the town settling. As long as the disaster was active, Robin was filling roles and doing jobs that weren't supposed to be hers because the usual people weren't there or life wasn't normal enough for routines. That when the trouble fades and the town stabilizes, the usual personalities slide back into place even at a radio station. That's the show reminding you that normal life isn't just about big heroic moments, it's about ordinary things returning, like who's behind the microphone. The music keeps doing that timeline stamp job during the epilogue too, just in a different way than the Prince choices. Near the end, Robin plays Here Comes Your Man by Pixies, and it's another detail that's easy to miss if it's just playing in the background. But Pixies have a different feel than earlier 80s pop hits. The sound points toward the edge of a new era, like culture is shifting toward the 90s, even if the characters are still standing in the remains of an 80s nightmare. It makes the happy moments feel grounded in a real time and place, and it helps sell the idea that Hawkins is finally allowed to have normal, simple joy again. Then there's a very quiet, very important Easter egg that shows up in the form of a memorial plaque. It labels what happened in Hawkins as a great earthquake. On the surface, that's just the town's official explanation, the story that makes the tragedy make sense to outsiders. But for the audience, it's also a reminder of how the Stranger Things world has always worked. The truth is too strange, too terrifying, and too impossible for the public to accept, so the public gets a neat version. That plaque is basically the final cover story, and it proves the characters will always live with two realities at once: what the town believes, and what the core group actually survived. That plaque moment also sets up one of Hopper's most sharply honest lines in the finale. When Karen panics because Mike is missing, Hopper doesn't act like she's being dramatic. He jokes that this town does have a history of kids going missing. It lands as dark humor, but it also lands as the show acknowledging itself. Hawkins has been a missing kid town since the very first season, and saying it out loud in the finale feels like the series letting the characters finally admit what the audience has known for years. It's funny, but it's also sad because it confirms how much this place has stolen from them. The show also uses Hopper's look and role as its own kind of callback. After so long of seeing him dragged away from being the grounded protector of Hawkins, the finale leans into him feeling like the sheriff again. That's not just about putting him in a familiar position, it's about showing he's reclaimed something. Hopper spent years being thrown into situations that were bigger than any badge, and now he's back in a role that feels human. It's like the story is saying he's still carrying everything, but he's finally able to carry it from a stable place, not from a constant emergency. And then the finale hits one of its biggest Easter egg clusters, Dustin's valedictorian speech. On paper, it's just a funny graduation moment. In reality, it's loaded with meaning because he frames his speech in Dungeons & Dragons language. That choice is so specific to the show's identity that it almost feels like a signature being written on the ending. D&D was always the group's shared code. It was how they explained the danger to each other, how they named monsters, and how they stayed calm enough to keep thinking. So, hearing Dustin use that language in front of the whole school is a subtle shift. Something that used to be private, hidden, even mocked, is now being used proudly in public at a major milestone. Dustin's speech also includes those quick D&D alignment references. The way he talks like their story had heroes, villains, and messy in-between choices, just like a campaign. It sounds like a joke if someone doesn't know D&D, but to the people who do, it's Dustin doing what he's always done. He's trying to make sense of the chaos by giving it a structure, and that's why it lands emotionally too. Because the audience knows he isn't just describing a fictional game, he's describing years of terror in the only language that ever made it feel survivable. But here's the detail that makes the whole graduation moment hit even harder. Dustin's big stunt at the ceremony isn't just a random choice in the spur of the moment, it's a tribute. He's doing what Eddie always wanted to do when he graduated, pulling focus from the stiff official ceremony and turning it into something loud and unforgettable that actually feels like them. Eddie never got the chance to live long enough to pull that kind of stunt off himself, so Dustin doing it becomes a way of carrying Eddie's voice into a room Eddie would have loved to shake up. It's not just honoring Eddie in a general way, it's carrying out something Eddie wanted in the exact kind of public setting Eddie would have made his own. That tribute becomes impossible to miss when Dustin reveals something during the ceremony. The Hellfire Lives shirt he's wearing under his graduation gown is a direct reminder of Eddie and everything the Hellfire Club represented, especially in a town that misunderstood it and turned it into a scapegoat. Pairing that moment with Iron Maiden's The Trooper is another layer of the same tribute, because it connects to Eddie's metal identity and the way music was part of his armor. It's a bold move inside the story because it forces the town to witness Eddie's legacy in a space that usually belongs to good kids and clean narratives. Dustin is basically refusing to let Eddie be erased or rewritten in a weird but beautiful way. And then, because Dustin can never stop himself, he stacks even more pop culture into the moment with that quick Belushi thing joke, plus the John Hughes reference. It's an especially good line because it's the show putting two different 80s icons in the same sentence. Belushi represents a chaotic style of comedy that became legendary, and Hughes represents the ultimate teen movie tone that defined the decade. Dustin comparing his own moment to those two cultural forces at once feels completely in character. He's not just making a joke, he's using pop culture as a way to describe himself because that's always been how he communicates. The epilogue keeps circling back to Dungeons & Dragons in a way that feels intentional. Almost like the show is saying, this is the heart of it, so it's going to end where it began. The final game is the cleanest example. Mike is the dungeon master again, which instantly echoes the earliest days of the group. That callback works because it isn't pretending they're the same kids from season 1. They aren't. But it shows they're still together, and they're still capable of doing something simple that doesn't involve survival planning. It's the finale giving them peace in the form of routine. It also matters who is around that table now because it signals what the group fought for. Max being there turns the scene into more than raw nostalgia. It shows the group is rebuilt, not recycled. They didn't just make it to the end, they brought people with them to make new memories. They kept relationships intact, they kept bonds alive, and they kept enough of themselves to still enjoy something that once felt like pure childhood. That's a big deal after a story that spent years threatening to strip all of that away. Then the finale adds one more full circle beat by showing Holly and a younger group forming their own D&D crew. That moment is quietly huge because it echoes the very start of Stranger Things without needing to say a word about it. A new batch of kids, a new table, the same kind of imagination. It suggests that Hawkins, for all its damage, still produces friendship the same way it always did. It doesn't automatically mean the horror is coming back. It just means the core spirit of the show. Kids finding a world together through a game survives past the ending. And finally, the credits themselves turn into a massive meta Easter egg. The show presents its characters and their biggest moments like pages in a Dungeons & Dragons player's manual. Almost like the entire series has been turned into a campaign record. That's a perfect last move for Stranger Things because D&D wasn't just a prop. It was the frame the story lived inside. It was the language that turned fear into strategy and confusion into something they could name. Ending by making the whole show feel like a campaign book is basically the series writing its own legend, then closing it. The music choice over that final stretch is just as intentional. The credits use David Bowie's "We Can Be Heroes," which is about as direct as a finale message can get without spelling it out. It's the show's last reminder that the people who saved Hawkins weren't trained soldiers or chosen ones. They were kids, parents, and broken adults who kept choosing to fight for each other anyway. That's what makes the ending work. It doesn't pretend the trauma never happened, but it does make it clear that they earned the right to live on the right side up together with their story finally behind them. So, as you can tell, this final episode was overflowing with Easter eggs and careful track choices. Which one of them was your favorite? Are there any we missed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more Stranger Things content and theories, click the video on screen now.